from the Ticats Audio Network. This is the Ticats This Week.
Welcome to the debut episode of Ticats This Week. I'm Rick Zamperin, Matt Bucknor's here, Mike Daly is here. Future episodes will have Simone Lawrence, and who knows, maybe a cast of characters as well when it comes to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. 2 preseason games are done, 18 regular season games are on the slate, and who knows what happens after that. We'll all have our fingers crossed come playoff time. Before we get into today's hot topics, I do want to mention a very sad story across the Canadian Football League, and that is the passing of Milt Steagall's eldest son, Chase Stegall. He died Monday morning. He was found in his residence at the University of DePaul in Chicago Monday morning. Just 20 years of age, a sophomore at the university. He played soccer, clearly had a bright future ahead of him. We don't really have any other details, but we just wanted to offer our thoughts and prayers and certainly condolences to the Stegall family. I'll put you guys on the floor as well. You can offer your condolences. Matt, we'll start with you and your memories of Milt and offering of condolences to the Stegall family.
Yeah, no, definitely sending my thoughts, my prayers to the entire family. Of course, the organization of the Bombers and all of it is so impacted by this, the university that Chase attended to. And I didn't know Chase, but just been able to, over the years as a fan, of course, as a player, and now, at post football, bumping into Stegall and he's just talk about just like ambassadors of the CFL. He's definitely up there as one of them, and of course he has had a storied career. But aside from his football days, he's just a great man, and of course you never want to see anything like this happen to anyone, and it's just such an unfortunate thing that's happened. And so definitely sending my thoughts and prayers to Milt and his family.
Mike?
Yeah, and the thing about the CFL, and when you're around it long enough, as we all have been, it becomes a really tight-knit family, a tight-knit community, and you start to understand, everybody that's a part of it. So when, one of your teammates in the CFL community, and this is Milt Stegall in this case, is hurting like this, it's, all your condolences go to them, but the whole CFL community feels for him, and I think it's because of what he brings to this sport, and the like Buck said, the ambassador, and just the happy-go-lucky attitude that you always see. So yeah, a very unfortunate situation, and our hearts go out to him from the whole CFL family, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I do have a statement from the Canadian Football League as well on the sudden passing of Milt Stegall's son, Chase. Quote, "It's difficult to imagine a more devastating tragedy than the loss of a young son or daughter. The hearts of everyone in the CFL and our legion of fans go out to our dear friend Milt Stegall and the entire Stegall family upon news of the sudden passing of his son, Chase Stegall, a soccer player at DePaul University in Chicago. Chase is already being remembered as a gifted athlete, a kind-hearted friend, and someone who had a positive effect on all who knew him. Qualities synonymous with the Stegall name here in Canada." That from Commissioner Stuart Johnston. So, yes, our condolences and thoughts and prayers with the Stegall family. Let's move on to some football talk involving the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Mike, we'll start with you. Your impression of Hamilton's 2 preseason games: beat Toronto at Hamilton Stadium 24-16, lost in the rematch to the Argos 30-23 at Alumni Stadium in Guelph. What came to mind? What stood out to you in those 2 games?
The first game is first and foremost that it really impressed me. I said this on our show before, but I was really impressed with how that first team offense looked early on in that first game. You're talking about a couple near misses that Bo Levi Mitchell had to Tim White in the end zone, you think, and there's another deep curl that Kenny Lawler that was just a little bit low, but that's what you're working out in training camp. Like, Buck, I'm not sure about you, but every time I stepped into training camp, I definitely was not game ready until the end of training camp, and that's the things that you have to work through. It's some of that timing, and they were really on point. And that offense is going to be cooking with gas. You bring in Kenny Lawler, you bring in Greg Bell now with a little bit more experience. It's going to be really exciting to see how well they were doing in that first preseason. Move into that second preseason. Obviously, you get a little bit of look at some of the backup players. I thought Keaton Brugly made the squad on that second preseason game with how he played. And there was a lot of depth at that Canadian receiver spot, and he made the squad. And it also, we all know this, right? Rick, you've been around long enough. Buck, we've seen this enough times. that is a next man up mentality. So to see Taylor Powell get out there, get more reps under his belt, because a lot of the time in the CFL, you see 2 quarterbacks playing, if not 3. And to have a person like Taylor Powell get that real game live experience and be ready to go behind the Hall of Famer Bo Levi Mitchell, it was a very positive outcome for both those games for the Ticats. So I was very excited to see that.
Matt, what stood out to you in those 2 preseason games?
I thought one of the things that stuck out was the depth across the board. Depth at DB. There's a lot of competition at defensive back. They had to make some tough decisions with the roster cuts, but there were some really good standouts. I thought Quantrez Knight. Quantrez Knight was a big standout. Of course, he was one of the guys that got released, but another guy, Zamari Walton. You just got some really good play from some of their defensive backs in the back end, and of course, looking at their, I guess it's going to be their starting unit. You have Amos coming in. You have Moxie there. Stubblefield didn't even play, and that's going to be another guy that's going to make some noise. And of course, he's an experienced DB, and so their secondary has a lot of experience. A lot of these guys have played together, not all together, but you had Amos and Peters who played together, so they have a little bit of that continuity. And then you have Moxie as well as Brandon Dozier, who have also had a little bit of experience together, playing together in Calgary. And then, of course, you add in the element with Coach Brent Monson as their D coordinator, who both Moxie and Dozier have played for. I think that just kind of creates a fun element for that team, of course, making it a little bit easier to kind of get transition into that, that learning curve. Because Daly, you know how that is, learning that new playbook, new D coordinator rolls in, there's going to be new terminology and things like that. Of course, cover 3 and cover 2 is all the same, but it's just learning the nuances and those little terms that you got to memorize, and those checks, all of those things. It can wear on you through training camp. And so I think that's going to be one of the things that stuck out to me. Of course, the O-line, I thought the O-line showed some pretty good depth. As well, Canadian depth at that, which is something that of course, we all know that if you don't have Canadian depth in this league at any team, it's going to be really difficult for you to have success. And so, seeing the Canadian online depth, and of course, Daly, we talked about it. This high flying receiving core. You mentioned Brugling, but then you have Tim White, then you have Wolotarski that just rolled in from Winnipeg. You have Kenny Lawler who's out there. I thought the depth from this receiving core, of course, I'm sure Bo he's going to bed every night through training camp smiling, because these are the types of problems that you want to have as a quarterback. And of course, Taylor Powell doing the same thing. So I know Scott Milanovic, I'm sure, is going to have a fun time with this entire offense, really.
Well, I just want to go back to one thing. Go
Sorry,
ahead,
Ray. And Buck, a funny story about that. So you mentioned some of the plays and learning all the new names of a new coordinator or whatever. I used to get white tape. I tell all my players this. They're from Laurier that are going to camp. And what I would do is you write down, because you've already had these plays, right? All cover 3s are the same. All cover 2s are the same. But you would write, for example, cover 2 now is called blue. But cover 2 when I played last year was called sky. Right? So then whatever it might be, so that you looked at, you'd be like, okay, cover 2 is really what I know as sky, but it equals blue or something like that.
Blue.
So you'd have yourself a novel.
Your cheat sheet.
As you're trying.
See, that's a true vet right there.
That's right.
That's a true vet right there. Out there with the wristband and write a couple notes on there. That's a vet move. I love that. Dude.
That's right.
How much tape would you have on your wrist, Mike? Like reams with all these codes, or?
All depends on how much they were asking me to do. If it was, I know in preseasons it'd be going out there. Who am I blocking on this? What am I doing? I was not messing up. And if I had cheat sheets, listen, in school, if the professor gave you cheat sheets, you filled that thing out to the very little corners. You know what I mean? Little letters. So as much space as I could fill on those white tape, wrist tape, I was doing it.
I want to stay with you, Mike, because you mentioned something earlier on. That curl route to Kenny Lawler that was just short, Bo overthrowing Tim in the end zone. And there was another post pattern that he kind of overthrew Tim White on. Is being close okay in the preseason? Obviously, you want to make those receptions, you want to make those completions, but is it a good sign that they're at least kind of close and they're almost on the same page?
If you had Bo on this show right now, he would say no, not good enough. But when you look at it from an outside perspective as we're all sitting here, I think so. I believe that there is some rust that you have to shake off. When you're training outside of football and you haven't come into training camp yet and you're throwing routes on air, you don't have a big D lineman chasing you and somebody actually trying to, put you through the ground, you don't really get that same feeling. So now once you're into a game, you can get hit. You're trying to time things up correctly. You're seeing a different defense than you've been seeing in camp. So things are happening a lot quicker. When you're that close making the right reads, just off by a little bit, that stuff comes, right? Bo is going to learn from that preseason game that he had, and he's just going to shake that rust off and move on in. So I was, even the one that Tim was just outstretched, and Tim would even say that he could catch that in the back of the end zone in that first preseason. But you look at that, I was very excited to say, oh, okay, look at that. Or look, and then they're forcing the ball to Kenny Lawler on that curl that I mentioned, and they threw it on time. But that's learning Kenny Lawler. That's learning how he's going to run those routes in a game. And that stuff is going to come, and that's what training camp is for. Especially preseason game one, you don't really have a ton of reps that you can get in before you really are trying to put that into play.
I was just about to say that, Daly, when you talk about the amount of repetitions. I know they had the black and gold scrimmage, which there was a lot of guys that got a good number of reps, but it's not game speed. It's not the same. And then when you get to that first preseason game, everyone's moving fast, but you only get to move fast. That first unit we just talked about, they were out there for, yes, Bo was there for 3 quarters, but how many reps did they? It was 3 quarters of play, but how many reps did they really get? And so I know they're going to tighten things up, of course, and those I'm with you, Daly, all the way. Those passes, those are going to be receptions come week 1 and beyond.
I want to get to the training camp cuts, and Matt, we'll start with you on this one, because there were, some familiar names who are no longer Ticats: Luther Hukunavanu, DQ Thomas, Quantrez Knight, who showed well in the preseason. What we don't know is the thought process behind that. Those guys could have been offered practice roster spots. They could have been offered maybe a different role in the organization in terms of, sticking around if, there's some injuries, hang around, we'll bring you back. Was there a name or two that kind of jumped off the page for you to say, wow, I didn't expect that?
You know what? It was Luther Hukunavanu for sure for me. I know he had that, devastating injury during the season last year, and I'm sure he was chomping at the bit to come back and show his worth and make an impact come training camp as well as the preseason. And that was a name that I thought, could have stuck around, but we just mentioned how deep this receiving core really is. I didn't even mention O'Leary Orange. I didn't even mention Taylor Tanowski. Like there's so many players that can contribute. Of course, we have Smith, that's one of the other elite Canadian receivers, and so this is a deep core, and I think he was just one of the guys that is just the odd man out, unfortunately. And I think they may have, again, I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but I love that you mentioned that, Rick, where they probably did offer him a practice roster agreement. And he's thinking, you know what, I think this is an opportunity for me to bet on myself, which I have, I support that wholeheartedly, where, if you feel you have that opportunity, you can contribute on another team, go for it. And I think that team, if I'm going to make some predictions for Luther, I think that team could potentially be the Calgary Stampeders, who he already does have familiarity with. And I think that could be a team that ends up bringing him back to give him another shot.
Biggest surprise for me was Quantrez Knight, just because of the way he played in both preseason games. Special teams guy, I thought there was a good fit for him there. But again, he could have been offered a PR spot and said, you know what, I'll try my hand at another team. Mike, is there a player that you thought, wow, that's a surprise to me?
Well, yeah, I think DQ Thomas was, and this is just because these are the names that we remember from last year. And, we're not around camp all the time. We're not experiencing what these players are this year. But, Rick, I'm going to go back to, and Buck, you both mentioned Quantrez Knight, because a little look behind the lens here is Quantrez Knight goes out there. That first preseason game looked unblockable on special teams. That one tackle he made was unbelievable, where you're like, okay, it takes a long time for somebody to learn how to do this as a gunner position. And then he ends up going in on defense that second preseason game, and he made some good tackles on defense that first one, and made some mind-blowing plays. He blitzed in through the A-gap, tackle for loss, and you look at that and you're like, okay, this guy knows how to play some football. Then when he gets cut, this is where the entire training camp practices matter so much. So what I believe is when you see things like this happen, and Buck, we've seen this plenty of times, Rick, you've seen this plenty of times, where a guy can flash in those games because he is a physical player, but a lot of it is IQ and understanding the defense, playing within the defense as well. It's easy to go out there on defense and just free roam. If a defensive coordinator says, hey, Buck, today you just get to do whatever you want, Buck's going to go make some plays.
Sign me up.
But what Buck's also going to do is give up a lot of big plays, and the defense won't be working together. So when you see situations like that happen, it's usually a product of that. It's usually a product that, he wasn't playing within the defense or just didn't fit. He might go to a different team, especially the film that he put on for those 2 preseasons. Yeah. He might go to a different team and be unbelievable for them, right? But for the Ticats this year, he didn't fit with them in their defensive scheme, whatever it might be with Munson. And that's just a little look at that because, Rick, you're right. If you just watch those 2 preseason games, you go, whoa, Quantrez Knight, he's starting on every position that they can get him out there for.
Another thing we don't see, too, and you guys would have lived this as professional football players, is the meeting room scenario. Are the coaches truly believing that player ABC, like they get it? They can understand when the real action is happening, they can make the play. That's what we as fans and really the media do not see.
Rick, is so true. And as Mike, as you were talking about, just the scheme and understanding the scheme, they kept the defense very vanilla for that game. They probably played a little bit of man. It was like basic zones. They weren't getting into any of their, maybe combo coverages, anything like that. And so, yes, it gives you an opportunity to fly around. But then I love that you mentioned that, Mike, because behind the scenes, that playbook is thick. There's no joking about that. Like, that playbook is thick. It's like, can you grasp this playbook not only through training camp? Can I trust you not even through training camp, but through an 18-game season? Because we have some guys, if they go down, you got to be the next guy up. And can I rely on you? And the first guys that we talked about in that first unit are all veterans. They've all grasped other playbooks before. They played for other elite coordinators in this league. And so if, as a younger guy coming in, grabbing this playbook and understanding it, we can play cover one. Everyone can play man, but can you execute at a high level in the rest of the scheme? And so I thought that's a really good point that you brought to the table there.
Yeah, and Buck, don't forget, it's like crawling in training camp, right? It's about as easy as it gets, like you said. And when you play a team like that blue team down the road, when you play them 4 times, well, guess what? Your playbook's going to look a lot different each of those 4 games. So you better be able to pick up things quick, because by the 4th game, you're pretty much making up new plays at this point because you've run out of all the other ones that you've called. So yeah, it's a tough thing to grasp. And Rick, you brought up a good point. It's something that happens in the meeting room that nobody else would see, but coaches, players, everybody around you picks up on it pretty quick.
We've talked about final roster cuts. That includes the composition of the practice squad or the taxi squad, and there are a number of individuals there. So I'm going to ask you, and Mike, we'll start with you on this one. Which one practice squad player could make an impact in 2025? And here is the list. As of Sunday, when they released the practice roster, Kyle Sampson, Ty Anderson, Jacob Zott, Keaton Bruggeling, Philip Osai, Kyler Fisher, Braden Schwartout, Josh Johnson, the receiver, Trayshawn Ward, and Zamari Walton. What one player on that taxi squad could make a big impact in 2025?
Well, Rick, I'm glad you picked me first, because then Buck has to find a new pick. But I'm going to say, I'm going to say Trayshawn Ward, because what he was able to show in those 2 preseason games was that he has some of that explosive ability. And don't forget, just last season, James Butler started the season, and then Greg Bell comes in, and Coach Milanovich really liked Greg Bell because of that explosive playability. And now, when you have Greg Bell, who is experienced and looked really good, especially behind that offensive line, if anything were to happen to him, Trayshawn Ward's going to be the next starter that next game. He'll be in, and then he's going to have that opportunity. And he showed that he has that explosive ability, that opportunity to take one to the house, and that's what Coach Milanovich is looking for.
Great pick, because let's not forget Greg Bell did land on the injured list last season, so I'm not saying it's going to happen again. In fact, knock on wood, it doesn't happen again because Greg Bell is RB1, and he's shown that he's a super talented guy in the Canadian Football League. One guy that I looked at, and I know Matt's going to bring up his name, I'm thinking about the injury situation as well, and not only that, from a ratio standpoint. So Keaton Brugling, who had 2 touchdown receptions in the loss against the Argonauts in preseason game number 2 at Alumni Stadium, is a guy, I think, proved that he, in crunch time, can make the big play. So if a Canadian receiver, for whatever reason, isn't able to participate in a game, I think the Ticats coaching staff would be confident in saying, all right, Keaton, we're going to take you off the practice squad. We're going to insert you into the lineup. You might only play special teams, but we trust you enough to make an impact on the field. There are other guys on that list, too, that I think the Ticats coaching staff have a lot of confidence in, whether it's Josh Johnson at the receiver position again, Zamari Walton in the secondary, who showed well, especially against the Argos. I like the composition of the practice roster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know what, Rick? I agree with you completely with the Keaton Brugling situation. Like I said, I believe that he made that team as a second preseason game went along because of how much production he had and the opportunity that he had and what he made with it. Now, you don't just make it on one game, so I'm sure his training camp was really, really well done. But when you look at him, he's a bigger body type receiver. You don't see that all that often. So now that provides you a lot of flexibility for if one of those Canadian receivers that the Ticats have starting right now go down, he can come in and contribute, like you said, on special teams because of that bigger body type. You can find some of those speedier guys as those DBs that you put in for special teams, but in order to use a receiver on special teams and have him be a bigger body like that, it's pretty hard to find, and he provides that for the Ticats.
Were you ever on the practice roster in your career?
My very first year, week 1, and then week 2, I'd gotten picked back up. So, when your very first year, you get called up to the practice roster, and you're excited because you're like, hey, I get more opportunities now to try to make this team. And the way you look at it from the practice roster scenario is, yes, you're on the team. Yes, you're close, but you haven't made it yet. It's still training camp for you. Now you're just doing a different thing, but you're waiting for that opportunity. You're waiting to prove yourself, try to help out as much as possible. So that was your mindset, and I believe that's the mindset of all the practice roster players, and it needs to be, because when that injury does happen or when they are looking to go a different direction, you want to be that first person up. So it's like trying to make the team each week, just doing it with a different look.
Yeah. Matt, so Mike picked Trayshawn Ward as his practice roster player that could make a big impact or an impact in 2025. I went with receiver Keaton Brugling, who showed well in the preseason game against the Argos. Do you have a player from the practice squad who could make an impact this season?
You know what? I thought Daly was going to take Zamari Walton. That's who my pick was, and that's who I could DB. I thought you were going to take him for sure, but you went Trayshawn Ward. So you couldn't go wrong either way with that one. But no, I love the play from Zamari Walton in that second preseason game. Had a lot of flashes. If you looked on the stat sheet now, he had 5 tackles, but it wasn't just like he's making an open field tackle or just like a regular tackle. Like these are like some impact plays that he made during the broadcast or during the halftime show. I called it, it's a tone setting play. You know, there's the receiver coming onto the flat, and the quarterback doesn't see him, receiver doesn't see him, big hit, and that the sideline just gets excited when that happens, right? And so I thought he made a great play that way. It actually happened a couple times. And then, of course, there was another deep play down the sideline where, you know, he was in really good coverage, basically hip to hip with the wide receiver, and got his hand on the play for a breakup. And so I thought there was great play from Zamari. He's going to be a guy again hopefully when his number gets called, he's ready to go.
Should be exciting. If any of those guys on the practice roster make an impact, that means that something will probably have gone awry with one of the starters. So let's hope that's not the case. But for the guys on the practice squad, you know, they're waiting patiently. They're putting in the time at practice. So if they do get that opportunity, best of luck to them. Let's switch gears and talk about, because this has been a talking point not only in this preseason, but in the offseason and towards the end of the 2024 season, and that is getting off to a fast start, a good start, a start that has more wins than losses at the end of the day for the Hamilton Tiger Cats in this season. So game number 1 is this Saturday. Tiger Cats, Stampeders, McMahon Stadium in Calgary. By the way, 7 o'clock kickoff on the Ticats Audio Network. Tiger Cats pregame begins at 6. We'll have Tiger Cats game day with Louis B. and Mike Daly as well that you can listen into. Matt, we'll start with you. What does this team have to do against Calgary to not only win that game, but get off to a fast start in this season?
Okay, so it's so cliche, and I'm using the word execute. It comes down to execution for them. Of course, we talked about the receiving core and how electric that receiving core is, but I think creating some type of a balanced attack offensively can throw off the Stampeders. And again, we don't know what type of Stampeder team we're going to see that day. I know they had 2 pretty good preseason games, beating BC and then dominating against Edmonton. I think the score was 31-4, I believe. And so, they kind of showed some dominance there. And I think it'll be for them, for the Ticats, it's going to be establishing a balanced attack offensively. And then defensively, it's almost creating a newer identity. What's our identity going to be defensively? And I think this is going to be a team like we talked about. I talked about how deep this defensive back core is, and we didn't even mention anything about the linebacking core, which is really solid too. Where you have Wilson and you have they're just some pretty big dogs that they have there, and of course that D line, so they can establish an identity and create create turnovers. You talked about starting fast. I think this is an opportunity to get off to a 1-0 and then continue that trend for the remainder of the season.
Mike, what has to be in the secret sauce to make it a special start?
Well, I think the story that's not getting told right now is Brent Munson going back to his old team, where those 2 coaching staffs, they know each other very well. And I can tell you, if you coach with somebody for a very long time, you know their main stuff, you know their counterpunch, you know their counterpunch to their counterpunch and what that looks like. You know that entire playbook inside and out, and you know how they work. So it's going to be a battle of these coaching staffs, getting each of them prepared, because Brent Munson knows that offense very well. That offense knows his defense very well. And how is that going to work together? Week 1 is always just an absolute you-know-what show, because you have no idea who's going to show up on that side, right? We're going to talk about it, I know, Rick, but with Vernon Adams, now that's new. Julian Hauser is now over with the Ticats. It's a new group altogether, and it's always so tough to determine. But I think what's going to really help this Ticats offense and this Ticats team, because of how the offense is going to roll, is the continuity that they have now. Last season, it was, still trying to get everything worked out and who's going to be in there. Now Greg Bell's there. Bo Levi Mitchell's there. The remaining of that receiving core is really there. Add Kenny Lawler in. And it's just going to be business as usual as they finish last season and into the training camp a little bit. Buck hit it right on the head, where it's going to be on that defense to pick this up quick, get an identity quick, and make some plays quick. I do believe that the offense is going to be ready to roll. This defense being new and only having the training camp to really get together, that's where some of these playmakers like a Jamal Peters or a Deshaun Amos or a Kyle Wilson are going to really have to step up. And we haven't mentioned Stavros Katsantonis are really going to have to step up, make big-time plays to get the ball back to this continuity offense that we all know from Tigertown.
And it's not like the Ticats have been blown out 35-3 in these first games of the season. Like, many of them have been close, including last game, the last season starter in Calgary. 2 things I picked up on both your answers. Buck, you mentioned execution. Mike, you mentioned the poop show, if I could paraphrase.
I said it a little nicer,
factor,
I think.
Yes, no, I think it did. Is another factor, and this is maybe leaning towards the you-know-what show, is that the team, especially in maybe weeks 1, 2, and 3, certainly in week 1, is the team that makes the fewest mistakes in that game, because it's chaotic with new players and you're trying to figure out, each other. Is the team that makes the fewer mistakes usually the one that wins?
Yeah,
I think that's a
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Rick. And you said it bang on. You saw it in the preseason where there's opportunities for touchdowns because of a bust on defense, or a drive stops because somebody ran the wrong route. Well, guess what? That still happens in week 1. And Buck, you remember this, a little bit of what you're going to experience in Calgary is it's not like playing at altitude like in Denver, Colorado, or anything like that, but you're at a little bit of altitude, and chances are that first game of the week, which I remember kind of always being Calgary for whatever reason, you get pasties in your mouth. Now that 20-second play clock, the roster has shrunk, so now you're trying to play whatever it might be, defense, special teams, or offense, and special teams, they're not slowing down the play clock at all, so that's 20 seconds between. You can't breathe. The water doesn't work anymore. You're not sure why the water isn't getting the pasties out of your mouth. And then now you got to go out there. Yeah, you got to go out there and not make any mistakes and if you do, it might be a touchdown or a stop of a drive. So you hit it right on the head, Rick, with all that going on in your mind. It's a lot, and you got to really dial it in so you're not making mistakes.
Matt, you want to jump in?
I remember you're sucking wind during the warm-ups. You're like, man, this is gonna be a long day. I'm like, I thought I was in shape. I thought I was in condition. What's going on?
Why is it so hot?
Yeah, no, that
what
altitude,
the heck's going on?
Right, that altitude can hit you. But as you talk about starting fast, I think one of the things that Hamilton, again, I hate like referring back to past seasons and last year. But in past seasons they've had slower starts to the season, and it kind of puts them in a bit of a hole, or a bit of they're kind of digging, trying to dig their way out of these just these tough binds as it gets deeper into the season. And so if you can start fast, it gives you these opportunities to give yourself a little bit more grace as you approach near the end of the season. And so I think, starting this game, and then of course working on to week 2 and week 3, I think it's important.
Yeah, I don't really like looking back either, because you can take nothing from it to win game number 1 this week. I only bring it up because I think the Ticats have won like one season opener in the last 22 years or something like that. And in some of those years, they've been like last year, 0-5. Previous years, 0-8. It's like, and fans are like, what is going on? So let's just brush that aside. But to that end, the coaches know it's chaotic as well, right? These aren't rookie coaches. They've been in the league either as head coaches, offensive, defensive coordinators for years. Matt, we'll start with you on this one. In week 1, do they simplify things for you to execute, knowing that execution is going to win the day?
That's a good question, Reagan. I think it depends on the personnel that you put out there. If it's going to be a group that's not too familiar with your system just yet, because you can get a beat on that through training camp, through the preseason. You start to review the film, you have some of the meetings, and you start to look at how the players are, even communicating out on the field. And you say, okay, maybe I threw too much at these guys, and I got to scale it back a little bit. Or you see if these guys are playing fast, playing physical, they're locked in the meetings, and you say, okay, maybe I can give them a little bit more. So I think it all depends on how these guys have been grasping the terminology, of course, grasping the system through training camp, and then you can kind of either dial it back or scale it forward come game 1.
And Mike, when you look at the offense and the defense, we'll forget about special teams for a second, but offensively and defensively, there's much more continuity on offense with the Tiger Cats from last year to this year. There's some new pieces on defense, not as many as there were from 2023 to 2024. There is some continuity on D. Knowing that, do the Ticats, just on the surface, say we can be more aggressive on offense because we have that continuity? We were explosive in the second half of the season. Let's push the envelope at least offensively in game number 1.
Yeah, I think the Ticats are in a lot better of a situation defensively. And, we don't talk about last year, but coaches right now are using last year to get this team ramped up to start fast. You've heard Coach Milanovic talk about it already. That's the only thing that you're focusing on. And when you focus on something, that's what's going to come to fruition. So he is focusing on that. And I do believe this defense is going to start faster than they did last year. You look at last year with some of those new guys, especially in the secondary more so, and even Ray Wilborn, that's playing really well now. A difference from one season to the other. We talked about with Dustin Talbert. We talked about with Wilborn. One season makes a huge difference. Now you bring in experienced people like Deshaun Amos, Brandon Dozier, Reggie Stubblefield when he's healthy. You bring in experienced people like that, it's just going to revamp that defense and get everybody going a little bit quicker. So you talk about starting fast. Well, that means that you're learning less. And I shouldn't say learning less as these vets are learning less, but what they do is they have that experience already. And some of these newer guys from last year now have another year of experience. So starting fast is going to come just by fruition, or just by the defense already having more experience under the belt as a whole, as opposed to what we were seeing last year in the comparison of the two teams.
I'll never forget asking Danny McManus how long it took. Here's a Hall of Famer who played the most difficult position on the field, and I go, you guys will probably argue that. But I asked him, how long did it take him to figure it out in the Canadian Football League? And he said, 5 years. It took him 5 years to finally say, okay, I understand. I know what defenses are doing. I know what I can do offensively. I know how to rally a team. I know, the locker room composition, how to get guys riled up and on the same page. Is that a good barometer for a player these days, or have things changed to the point where you're in training camp and you've already kind of figured out a lot of the stuff? Or is it still that Danny Mac kind of situation where it takes you, a few years?
I think it depends on the type of player that's coming in. Sometimes you have some high IQ. Not to say that Danny Mac was not a high IQ player, but it's some guys you see, they kind of just get a handle on it fairly quickly. Now that's usually the more skills positions. You see that with like Shamar Burgess came in last year and he flashed, right, in his rookie season. Quarterbacks, you don't really see that because there's just so much to learn and to grasp as a quarterback, and so the development usually is a lot longer, or a lot slower, I should say, for a quarterback as opposed to a skill position. DB could come in. We've seen it all the time. Delvin Breaux comes in his rookie season and he's clamping everybody, right? And so it's the skill position can get away with that. I think that you have those quarterbacks and sometimes even offensive linemen. It's really tough to adjust to the CFL game, especially coming from the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Mike, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I truly believe that, and I've said this a couple times. Your first season, you're just trying to do what's on the paper of that playbook. You're just trying to be in the right spot, understand where to be. Hey, I don't want my coaches to yell at me, so whatever's drawn on this is what I'm going to do. But you're just getting to those positions and just figuring out what's going on from there, letting your instincts take over. That second year, or that time you make that next progression step, is now, okay, I'm going to get to my position, but now I know what people are doing around me. So now I know how to run my route. Now I know how to change my coverage so that I can make my plays and not worry about making other people's plays or seeing too much. By about that third year, I felt for a defensive back or for defensive players, now you're starting to understand what an offense is doing to you. And that's that's my experience. And even for those receivers, is now I'm trying to understand what a defense is doing to me. When this guy moves, it means that it might be cover 3. So I know that I have room over here to go make my play. And defensively wise, I know when the third receiver in the slot runs a flat out route at 0 yards, well, somebody's probably trying to find a place in behind me. So I'm going to turn around and I'm going to look, and now I'm going to know how to make that play. So for those skill positions, yeah, you can come in and make an impact right away by doing what's on the piece of paper. But I really think it's a 2 or 3 year mark, depending on that IQ of the player, when they're really going to start making plays. And I've said this, Destin Talbert is getting into that zone right now. And at that boundary halfback position, yeah, he gets a lot of action. So I'm pretty excited to see his trajectory this season in comparison to what he was before.
Great analysis by both you guys. That kind of stuff really, piques my interest, because that's like inside baseball, in this case, inside football, in terms of how you guys adjust, what you're thinking about, what you're seeing, what you're feeling, being in the meeting room, working it out in practice, and then obviously when live gameplay is, there's no room for mistakes, and if you make one, you're on the highlight reel for all the wrong reasons, as a DB at least. All right, your thoughts, and Matt, we'll start with this one, because there was a little bit of a shift in the West Division this year, with Vernon Adams Jr. going from the BC Lions to the Calgary Stampeders. Calgary dumping Jake Mayer, saying we're all in on, VA. What do you think of this move? What do you think of the Stamps? First impressions of this team?
You know what? I think Vernon, first of all, he's he's a proven leader in this league. You know, a lot of the teams that he's gone to, he's had success, and you can tell one of the things that that a lot of players look for is a player that or a leader that everyone can rally around. And Vernon just seems to have that presence with his teams, the teams that he's played for. The players, they love him. One of the things that I've noticed, he really owns the position, and he says, okay, he's there, and he's like I saw during the offseason, he's getting guys from all over, and they're doing their like a mini OTAs together, right? And I think that goes a long way in terms of building the chemistry. And so one thing you're going to get from Vernon is leadership, and then of course with his play, that's just like the off-field stuff. But on the field, you're getting a player that's explosive. He can make plays with his feet, and the man has a great arm. He can throw. He's been competitive in this league for so long. So he's a player that's very well respected, and he's gonna create a lot of challenges for this Hamilton Ticats defense.
Mike, how does VA jump off the page for you, and what should the Ticats be concerned about most?
Yeah, VA was a teammate of mine for a while, and actually playing against him. The exciting thing about VA is exactly what Buck said. He is just a proven leader. Everybody rallies around him, and that's a huge thing in a locker room, is for your leader, and which is normally the quarterback position, just because of the spotlight that comes with it. For a team to want to rally around that player is awesome. And it's always scary as a defense going up against a guy like VA who is now experienced, who can use his legs. Schematically wise, it does some things to you where you have to change your defense that you're not used. Usually your defenses are all scheduled around a quarterback that can't run, right? You think of the old Peyton Manning, Ricky Ray, Tom Brady, Bo Levi until last season when he started running all over the place. But you think about that, and that's how you structure your defense. But VA, he can do both. He can throw the ball. He has experience to see what's going on. He's seen a lot of the coverages. But then he can pull it down and run, which causes quite a bit of problems for that defense. So it's a tough matchup right off the bat. And just based on his competitive level and what everybody in the CFL knows VA to be, he's not going to give up until the end. So I'm excited to see, because it's a really good litmus test right off the bat about wanting to start fast. And talk about starting fast, going up against an experienced quarterback and a team that knows this defense really well. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm excited.
I'll ask you a question a little bit out of left field, and I'll go first on this one so you guys can mentally prepare for it. The one thing you're looking forward to most in 2025, and I've racked my brain because there's so many highlights that could potentially happen this season. But one thing I'm really looking forward to is the home opener. Garney Henley is going to be in attendance. His number 26 is going to be retired. A highlight for any player. There's only been Bernie Filoni, Angelo Mosca, and now the great Garney Henley. That's going to be awesome for fans as well. Matt, what are you looking most forward to in 2025?
I'm saying so you mentioned a few things. I'm looking at the play of the Canadian content. I think they're really deep, like I mentioned earlier. That's what I'm excited to see, is the play from the Canadian content. And a home playoff game. A home playoff game for the Hamilton Ticats. That's another thing I'm looking forward to. I'm fast forwarding to the end of the season, but those are a couple things that I want to see this year.
All right, Mike, what's the one thing you're most looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to, and Buck, I can't believe you left it for me, is this back end of this Ticats defense to now not be the Jamal Peters, Stavros Katsantonis show in terms of turnovers, but for now all the playmakers to come on out for that one play to be made, and then it itches for someone else to go make the play. And next thing you know, there's turnovers left, right, and center. I'm really looking forward to that back end because I'm excited. And I even said last year that it's really hard for new players to come in, understand defense, play in that back end. And this year, it's a lot of people that have that experience. So I'm looking forward to just pick city all over the place, Buck. Interceptions, cookies, getting thrown into the air, taken back to the house. We don't even need the offense to score with those guys back there. Let's just score ourselves.
Defense can score.
You know what I'm saying?
love
So
it.
I'm excited for that. And listen, Buck, you said playoffs, right? Rick, you said home opener. There's all nerves for those certain reasons. The closest thing you can get to a playoff atmosphere in the season is Labor Day against the Argos. So that's really what I'm looking forward to as well if we're going to pick a game, because my favorite games to ever play are any home playoff game and Labor Day, just because of the buzz that's around it and the excitement that it brings and what the fans do during those games. It's a lot of fun. It's really exciting to play in there, and you feed off that energy.
Looking forward to an exciting start to the season. Hopefully that includes a W for the Black and Gold as the Ticats take on the Stampeders in Calgary Saturday night. Pregame, Tiger Cats pregame begins at 6 with Bubba and Buck. And then we're going to have kickoff at 7 o'clock Eastern Time on the Ticats Audio Network with myself and Simone Lawrence. A new episode of Ticats This Week drops next week and every other week throughout the season. Thanks for joining us. Hope you liked episode number 1. Lots more to come here in 2025. Enjoy the day, and we'll talk to you soon.
This has been the Ticats This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. Like, follow, and get a deeper understanding of your Hamilton Tiger Cats.